I decided to put this video for those individuals who have relocated to the UK, either families, partners, single people who relocated from various parts of the world or from Africa, Asia, anywhere in the world. And having lived in the UK myself from Zimbabwe, there are some challenges that I faced for many years. And I've just been thinking that there are simple things that we take for granted. We've been here a little bit longer that some people may actually be struggling with. And I thought this may benefit those individuals. Things like finances, where to get help, how to pick schools for their children, and how to just basic budget, which area to live, and so forth. So I'm going to be covering those areas. And if you're one of those people who's got a few questions, I'm sure I'll answer one or two. Come to the end of it, I'll put some suggestions of places and areas that you can get help with your families. Right. So I just wanted to say that, having lived in the UK for 30 years plus, I'm fully aware that this country comes with its pros and cons, good and bad, and challenges. And I've faced them, trust me. And it's one of those places that if you haven't actually done your research, it could be a culture shock. The weather, for one, could be a real huge shock to the system, and the fact that one's got to work continuously. Sometimes it feels like you haven't got a break, and if you've got children, you've got to think about things such as childcare, and you've got to think about alternating shifts with your partner so that you can get the work in. All these things can be a shock to the system, and just trying to get hold of money can be another challenge that many people end up facing in this country, and many are facing lonely days and nights just trying to figure things out. I'm also aware there are some people who moved here from Africa who sold everything for this opportunity, assuming that it was a golden opportunity at the time, and they're probably here a year or so, and they're trying to think, goodness me, we haven't even saved as much as we thought we would, and yet we sold our house, we sold everything, thinking that, by the time we're a year down the line, we will be able to buy our home or do something productive. And I'm trying to reach out to those people and just give them some insights and encouragement that, yes, England now is quite different from the way it was about 20 years ago. Things have become very expensive. The economies have changed, and around Europe as a whole, the interest rates are rising and wages are staying stagnant. And for people who, particularly those people that live in London, and there are many people that move without actually knowing which target area they can move to. So I'll give you an example for somebody who might be thinking, I want to move to London. And London rents are very expensive as opposed to outside London. In some parts further out, the further out of England you go, or the further away from London you go, the cheaper it will be. So it will be very useful to be able to grab opportunities that are not in the center of London or anywhere near London, unless if the wage or the salary can match the cost of living. But I'll give you some slight insights into what you will be looking at before you actually make that decision. I'll give you an example for somebody who's on a skilled worker visa, who's probably working on the minimum wage and maybe a gross salary of 2,500 a month. And for that individual, there will be tax deductions and NI deductions. So if somebody's earning 2,500, the deductions will probably be around £400 from that salary. So that's £400 down. So if you're living in London, as far as I last checked, rooms in London to rent, depending on which part of London you're living in, averagely from £600-700 per room. And this is just a room, one bedroom, where you share with other tenants in the house. So you usually the bills are inclusive within these payments. So you'll be looking at that in terms of you'll be taxed from that gross salary, and then you also be paying those types of rents. And then on top of that, you've got to think about your sort of after you've taken the rent, you've got to think about if you've got a car, if you're doing a care job where you've got a car, you've got to think about the running cost of that car and maintenance, MOT, insurance. I think insurance is one of the highest, especially if you're a new driver, but if you're an experienced driver, but the initial time when you actually start driving here, it might be slightly high. But for new drivers, we're looking at between 80 and 100 pounds a month, sometimes even more. It just depends on the area and where the car is going to be parked. Is it going to be parked in a driveway or on the street? All that will add to the number of to the amount that you'll be paying on your insurance for your car. And then you got to look at food, you got to look at entertainment, you got to look at mobile phone bills, and then you've also got to look at the wear and tear for the car. And if you've got children, you might need childcare depending on what sort of work pattern that you're doing. So you need to look at these things and some people end up actually working alternating shifts with their husbands or wives so that they can be able to overcome the childcare or the school run costs. And then that comes with its own issues as well. If the child is going to school, you've got to look at making sure that they've got their uniforms and all the other things that they need. And I would assume that if you've got children, you'll be looking at a flat. And if you're working in London, a flat will be looking at probably 1,000, 1,200, unless if you're in areas that are much cheaper, then the rents may be a little bit cheaper. But this is what you're looking at. And then in the outskirts of London, you might get for a flat, a 2-bedroom flat, you might get for £900. And depending again on the areas in these places, there are some good and not so good areas. And then again, that's another point to bear in mind. If you've got children, you're not necessarily going to be wanting to live in the not so good areas, because the education system in this country is what we call the postcode lottery. So it just means that if your children are living in a particular area, they will be accepted in particular schools. So that's worth thinking about, because sometimes cheap can end up being expensive, especially for children. So you may need to do a bit of homework to find out some of the more moderate areas that are cheaper but closer to good schools. And that's what you will be looking at, because I think education is very important. And in this country where sometimes children can be playful, you need to pick your schools very carefully and look at the statistics of these schools, the reports, and how well the schools have been doing. But these are things you can ask family members or others who have been in these areas. So the cost of living can be quite high. And one thing that I've learned about being in this country for that long is that life can actually be better for couples. So if you're a husband and wife and you're sharing these costs, it can be a lot easier than a single person who comes in, lives in London, and is earning probably slightly more than what I've just mentioned there. But you can see the huge deductions. So one's got to think these things through so that they don't hit you by surprise, because then if you're taken by surprise, that's when the depression kicks in. Then you start to realize that the maths is not mathing, nothing is adding up. And then we've also got the black tax, where you've got to look after family members abroad, and we all do that. We've all been there, but one better come with a plan and well informed. That way, if you're going to get rid of your assets back in Africa, you're doing it knowing that I'm actually going to settle in England, and I'm going to now put my eggs all in there for the next however many years you decide you want to work. But if you're planning to return, as many often do, they come, they work for a period of time, they come for the experience, to be able to see this country, and then they will return. Then you've got to be well informed about disposing of your assets back in Africa or in whatever country that you're in, because the cost of living has really shot up of late. And if that hits you by surprise, you'll find that there are families and couples that are working 24 hours, that are not necessarily 24 hours, but the husband comes in and the wife goes out, and then their little time off, they're picking extra shifts just so that they can have that extra money to look after their loved ones back home, or just so that they can have extra money because they are living in a very expensive area. They've probably ended up in a very expensive house that they're renting, without realizing that on top of the rent, let's just give you an example. If you're paying 1,500 or 1,200 rent, you've got to look at the council tax. And council tax, depending again on area, can range between around 150, 200, 250, depending, because I think the council tax working out, the numbers, the way they work out, is highly dependent on the cost, the value of the house when it was sold within a particular time or something like that. But we're looking at those figures as well. And don't also forget the electricity, the gas, the food, the groceries. And there's a lot of things that one's got to plan. And you've almost got to come here with your wits about, especially around the budgeting. I mean, that's going to be the biggest shock, apart from just the cultural shocks of being in a new country, the climate, children trying to adapt in schools. All these things can add pressure, and often people can find themselves sinking and chasing money that's not there because they didn't do their sums. They didn't calculate their mathematics before they came. And a combination of all this can actually get people like walking zombies, whilst they're chasing this, the dream. And often that dream can then turn into something that's so negative. So my advice is, if you're leaving any country with your families, look at these things that we've talked about. Plan, have a real backup plan with your family as to what are you going to do. And if you're coming in as a single person, again, I would say if you're living in London, then find out from your employer if they're going to be supporting you with subsidizing some of your costs and rent. And I know London, depending again on which part of London you're living, parking can be a real issue. So sometimes you may have to incur some parking permits that you need to pay, which you pay to the council. So there's a lot of other things that one's got to really take into consideration. And I just thought it would be very, very useful to be able to share with those people that are new, that are coming in. And other things that are sort of negative factors that affect a lot of people in this country is just trying to adapt to the English way of life. And if you come here again without just knowing some of the basic etiquette, that you need, you could end up again struggling to be able to mingle in workplaces. And I sort of talk about the basic stuff as saying yes, please, and thank you. When you're working with people who are the natives or the locals here, they tend to understand that better when somebody does you a favor or gives you something or makes you a cup of tea, just basic thank you and yes, please. Oh, that's very, very kind of you. And these are the basis of building a foundation of, acquaintances or people that you're going to be, how people will relate to you when you start with that, because in different cultures things are done quite differently, and we appreciate that. But in this country it almost feels as you've got to make an effort for people to get to know you a little bit better, because people are a little bit guarded and they're a little bit closed. So it takes a while before people can open up to you, because we have different ways of presenting ourselves to people, which can take some people back if they have not had the opportunity to work with people from different cultural backgrounds. So that adaptation, that adapting is needed on both ends. But often the people who are hosting us are the ones that are actually observing. So I think we have to try and meet them halfway before we get to the point where we're a little bit more judgmental. I know there are challenges where there are some people that have not come across people from different countries, and they will find it shocking the way that we do certain things. But as time goes on, you'll pick it up. It's not all going to happen straight away. It will take time, and once you get those things, they can give you a little bit of peace of mind. And some of the more opportunities as well that are in this country that it's one of those countries that has got a lot of people from different cultural backgrounds. and you get people from all sorts. I think I've met people from Nigeria, from India, from Ghana, and I've seen more here than I did in my country. But then again, when I left, I was a little bit younger. I hadn't had time to explore in workplaces, but I've had the chance to be able to meet other people from different cultures. So that's a positive. So there are communities here from different cultures. So whatever community or whatever background you're from, you're more likely to meet other people through functions, through churches, through interactions. So times have changed now. Whereas when I came 30 years ago plus, things were slightly different. You had to really struggle. And with all the things that I've mentioned, without anyone telling you, without Facebook, where you could go and look for some tips. So, you've got to look on the brighter side right now. I know it may not feel like it, but you may be feeling homesick. You may be missing your family. You may be missing, your friends. And the weather doesn't help, because England is one of those places where you're lucky if you get 4 months of sun within the year. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to have long winters. And there is a time when we change our clocks where we have to sort of move the times, because otherwise people will be getting up when it's dark and coming back. It still happens, but at least it shortens the day a little bit. That's the idea of doing it. So a combination of that, coming from a sunny country where the sun generally brightens up people's mood, and the winters can really put you down, because one, you're cold, two, you're not seeing your neighbors, and you're getting up in the dark and you're coming back in the dark, and there seems to be no time for social life. And that's another thing that can get people down. But the opportunities will outweigh all that, because when you come in here, you've got the job prospects, the stability, the safety for your children, the free education for children, and the National Health Service is there for those people that are entitled to it. So there's free health care, and also, you'll be able to get paid well for the work that you do. So there are a lot of other positives. And one thing that I would sort of encourage those that have come in with families is be intentional about taking time to get to know your local community, to get to know people, and to be able to plan outings with your family, outings with your wife, outings with your loved ones, or find ways of meeting other people that you know that you may relate to, especially in churches and religious organizations and other places where you can go. You have to be intentional to be able to meet people. And once you do that, there are many places that you could visit that are for free. And if you become part of the National Trust, you can be able to go out there in the summer with your kids and visit all these beautiful castles and gardens. They often do food. And these are beautiful, lovely outings for kids, because there are all sorts of activities that people could do within these National Trust places. So if you become a member, you'll be able to see what's available wherever you want to go. And there are a lot of beaches, coastal places where you could go. You've got to be intentional, picnics, and meet with other parents at schools and see what's around and what's available. And if you've got family members or people that you are very close to, try and locate yourself closer to people that you know, so that you can have that support network if you need it. I know that people in this country are very closed and very private, and people do not like people to knock on their doors without an appointment. So, you've got to understand that as well, even if you're living nearby your loved ones, that people are working all sorts of hours. So before you can plan to go and visit them, or before you can arrange an outing, just be considerate, but be intentional about these outings. Be intentional about going out with your family, like I said, for a picnic, to the park, play areas for kids, and have protected time within your home to be able to engage in activities that you both love with your families. Because if you don't do that, I tell you, and if you watch the clock to see when you're going to recover the money that you spend before you can maybe relocate back, or if you're regretting and thinking, did I make the right move? Well, I think sometimes we've just got to turn our lemons into lemonade. We've got to be able to just count our blessings and just find happiness in the simple things, in the small things, that you've got your family, that you've got a warm house, that you've got people you can talk to on the phone, that if you want to ring your family members across the world or in Africa, as I do with mine in Zimbabwe, you can do FaceTime, you can talk to them. So there are a lot of positives that you could look at, and then that could help you to sort of look at life in a positive way, and stop waiting until specific things happen to find happiness, because you're already here, you've made the decision, and happiness is a journey and not a destination, and you've got to try and just appreciate the simple things. Practice an attitude of gratitude whilst you're here, and there are so many people that are willing to be helpful if you look hard enough, and if you yourself decide to take the right approach, and people will accept you and receive you over time. People are a little bit cautious, a little bit guarded. They'll get to know you in time, but you will meet friends. But be intentional and try and look at the bright side of some of the things that we've talked about, the positives, and just start to live each day as if it's your last one. Because if we don't, like I said, this is how I've managed to get through, because there are certain things that are beyond your control. So I look forward to speaking to my parents. I look forward to doing the things that I couldn't do before, which were, we had to use these telephone booths outside, and after 9 you carry £10 in coins, and then you speak to your parents for 5 minutes. But look at you guys now who have come recently. There's mobile phones. So in spite of what you may be going through, whilst you're figuring out how to navigate through some of the things that we've talked about, just be intentional about being happy. And I hope I've managed to encourage and inspire somebody, and I hope some of what I've covered, I've had to run them through because I didn't want to make this video too long. But if there's any area or any subject, anything that you felt I could sort of run it over again, feel free to ask me so that I can support you. But by all means, feel free to share in the comment section your journey. Where are you at your journey? Are you happy? What are you finding that's going to be bringing you happiness? How are you juggling family life? How are you juggling the life in England of paying bills? Have you figured out some of what we've talked about here? Have you got any advice for anyone who might be reading in this comment section that you could give them to support them, to encourage them? Let us inspire each other. I would like to hear from you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, it's Shelley here. Thank you so much.